So, Janet, we live in a very sort of interesting post-Brexit time when Britain, sort of the importance of Britain and being Britain and Britishness and being made in Britain is kind of more important than ever. What's your view of what Made in Britain sort of stands for, what it means at the moment, and why does it matter so much?
Made in Britain matters tremendously because in post-Brexit, we've got to establish ourselves as something unique that will stand out in a really overcrowded marketplace. And I suppose looking back on programs that I've made, like the F Word all those years ago with Gordon Ramsay, I did a program about, you'll think this is a bit bonkers as a sideways thought, I did a program about meat pies, and the meat pies that said made in Britain turned out to actually only have the lids put on in Britain, and the entire inside of the pie was meat from Poland or and a whole variety of countries. And yet the pies had Union Jacks on them, they had pictures on the packaging of fields, and they purported to be British. And that was a complete eye-opener for me, because after that I thought, well, what is made in Britain? And I understand that the government has tightened up that kind of labelling since then, since we highlighted it. But I think we've got to focus on what we're giving people if we say made in Britain, and what does made in Britain has got to stand for something that's really simple to understand that somewhere else isn't offering. So personally, I think Made in Britain stands for quirky, innovative, something that surprises you. Yes, and I also think the best things that are made in Britain have got a backstory, because a lot of what Britain is very good at is high-end products aimed at, you could call it the luxury market, but they're what I call work, either design or furniture or stuff that you're going to keep for a long time, that you're not just buying it to get rid of it. So a lot of what's best about Made in Britain is not disposable. What I find really weird about Made in Britain is the disconnect between the way that tourist boards flog Britain and what manufacturers and designers think is British. And I think there's a huge gap. Because I travel a lot, when I go to Italy or France, I think, well, I'm very clear if I go to Milan or northern Italy what they stand for. Yes, they've got great food and wine, but they've also got brilliant design, and they've got history and modern stuff side by side. And we have that in Britain too, but we don't seem to promote it very strongly. Come to Britain seems to be all about Beefeaters, Twiggy, and looking back in time. And Carnaby Street, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, I made clothes for Carnaby Street when I was in my first year at college in 1965. So why are we still pretending that Carnaby Street is great when we've got Shoreditch, Hackney, all these other places in London that are full of ideas and creative people, and people are coming to Britain from all over the world precisely because we give because of this big mix and because we're so open to new ideas.
So do you think it's a relaunch completely, or just a rebrand of what's already there and just a sort of tweak? How do you think we sort of, from a marketing perspective, do we approach brand Britain?
Well, we need to have heritage brands. So we need to break down brand Britain into heritage brands. Now, I think this is quite a tricky area, because there are some brands you might justifiably say are heritage brands already, like Burberry, for example. But if you analyse Burberry, most of Burberry's production is done overseas, and of course at the moment there's a big problem with them restoring this mill in Leeds. When they were going to, they announced that they were going to restore this mill and build factories and production in Leeds so that the gabardine raincoat, for which they're famous worldwide, would be made in Britain. And at the moment, I don't know if it is, I think it is still made, a few of them are made in Britain, but the vast amount of Burberry production is made abroad. But it's seen as a British brand by its big markets in Asia and China and Japan, because it emphasises Britishness. It uses British models. It's got a British designer, Christopher Bailey, who comes from around here. So I think you could say it is a heritage brand, because that's what's selling it, even though it's not made here. Dyson is another one. I mean, yesterday I bought a Dyson hairdryer because I tried one out and I just thought this is an amazing piece of design. It's designed in Britain. It's everything that's great about British design. It's small, it's light, it does the job, and there's no other hairdryer that looks like that anywhere in the world. That's a heritage brand, but I don't believe it's made here. So I think that you've got to get over the fact that not all heritage stuff won't be made here. And Cass Kidston's another example of a brand that's... Cass Kidston, when you go to Australia or anywhere, people love that stuff. They just think it's all her pyjamas and everything. Just shout Britain, but she's owned by Barings Asia. They own the controlling share in her business, and her expansion is going to be in the Far East.
Sounds like you're very keen on the importance of story. We've probably got a lot of buyers in the audience whose brief is perhaps to be commercially competitive. How do you square the two between having a great brand story and just being in business?
Well, you've got to understand your market. For example, if you look at the alcohol market, at beer, at brewing, and at gin, and so on. 20 years ago, when people were talking about what are the great British drinks, they go Scotch, everyone. Now, gin, and you've got all these small gin houses that are all creating with their product a unique story. So they're British. They've got you're not just getting a drink, you're getting a whole experience.
Yeah.
And also, I've got friends who are very high travel agents, and they now talk about experiential.
Yes.
What is this stupid word? It's actually a very uncomfortable word, but it kind of sums up when people want a cup of tea, they want an experience.
Yeah.
Or when they go to Betsy's, they're not buying a cake, are they? They're going for an experience. So I think that whole idea of experience being part of just buying the object is a really key thing now, and that's something that has really, really taken off, and you can apply it to beer. So I go down to Kent a lot, and in a town like Faversham that already had one big brewery, Shepherd's Neame, now has at least 10 microbreweries in former shops. So these are tiny little pubs. So 5 years ago, we heard the British pub was dying on its feet. Well, maybe it is, but it's come back in another form. I think this is all fascinating. It's good news for manufacturers and creative people, because I don't think as one area dies, I do think another one opens up.
It's great to hear your very positive spin on the future for Britain. One problem I can see is sort of getting British people on board with that, because I think one other thing that's very British is sort of a sense of cynicism and self-deprecation. You mentioned Italy. They've got pasta, they've got wine, they've got vino, they've got pesto sauce. We've got chips and mizzle and bad weather. How do you get British people on board with sort of being proud and patriotic when patriotism as well is not seen as a cool thing? And people sort of say made in Britain.
But it was cool in Tony Blair's. We had Cool Britannia,
yeah.
but then maybe that's tainted because of Tony Blair.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, the whole...
But actually, did Cool Britannia ever really go away? Because some of the people who are in Cool Britannia in all those photographs in Vanity Fair are still around. The Gallagher brothers are still fighting. Alexander McQueen's sadly passed away, but Sarah Burton's designing.
Yeah.
Alexander McQueen has gone from strength to strength as a fashion label internationally.
No, but I'm just saying, sort of young people sort of saying, I'm back in Britain. Is that a cool thing to say? Or has sort of a sense of jingoism about it that some people
Why
might
are you
not...
embarrassed about that? I think if you walk around Rome or Milan, people are confident. Are you saying that when you walk around Britain, they're slouching, moaning about the weather? Well, I'll have to remember not to do that. But, we do harp on about the weather, but then we have the weather before and after every news bulletin, and it's always presented by these people with, making too much of it, in my opinion. But I'll give you a good example of a product. When you say we've got black pudding and blah, 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 I love Doreen's black pudding, right? Has anyone here eaten Doreen's black pudding? No.
Who's Doreen?
Exactly, that's my point. This is an example of an incredible product that I only discovered when I came to live in Yorkshire, whenever it was, in the 80s. So Doreen's black pudding is triangular now. I know, it's wacky, isn't it? Someone decided to make triangular black pudding. It's packaged and it says Doreen's black pudding. Now, I'm sure if that black pudding had a label attached to it saying the story of Doreen and why it would sell 5,000 pieces more black pudding, but it's just there. And that is so true of so much British marketing. We make brilliant stuff, but we don't really see how to sell it and how to connect it to the people who've got a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, I can buy any old black pudding. I can go and buy any old rubbish black pudding in a supermarket, cheaper. But I want Doreen's because I'm kind of in love with the triangle, and it does taste great.
I was going to say, presumably it tastes great as well.
Yeah.
It's not just Doreen.
But the market is overcrowded. And so how do you make... I mean, if you think about Betty's, that's a really good example. It's a tea shop. It's in a town where more and more fast food places have opened, more and more tea shops have opened. They've withstood the onslaught of Cafe Nero and all these chains, Starbucks and all of them. And yet there's only one Betty's. And that's because their backstory has been endlessly reinforced. They constantly train their staff. And they've built a whole mythology about what you get if you go there, to the point where even if you can't get there, you can order it online and be part again of that experience.
But Betty's is tradition. As a tradition.
Yeah, but they've updated it.
Well,
the thing is, it's not what people ate and drank in 1920. It's what you think they did because they constantly modernise it.
True, but don't we need to be encouraging the new Betty's as well and creating Betty's that are launching in 2017, who will be there in 2050?
Yeah, but in a way the microbreweries have done that.
Okay.
That's what I would argue,
Okay.
that they saw that British pubs were places full of, depressing old codgers stinking of packets of fags, and that women went in and felt a bit out of place. And they made drinking beer, which, has become a cult thing again. They reimagined it.
So what are your favourite British brands?
My favourite British brands would be, as a retailer, John Lewis, definitely. As furniture, Conran, Habitat. When it comes to flooring, people like Christopher Farr, who makes handmade rugs. You see, I think that a lot of people of my generation, the baby boomers, have reached peak stuff. Like, we've got so much stuff. Why do we need any more stuff? And there was a very good piece in the Financial Times a few months ago that said, we've reached peak stuff, so how do you sell to that generation who've got everything they ever need? So you're only going to sell to someone because you're going to sell the experience, you're going to sell the quirkiness, the fact that it's going to be a heritage thing. We've got to redefine the heritage. So in my home, I have quite a few things. I've chucked out lots. I've got rid of lots. But what I buy now, I'm buying because I'm looking at it and I'm thinking it's enhancing my life. It's not just stuff for the sake of it.
I'm going to throw you a challenge. Say your house or one of your houses is on fire and you've got to run out, and I'm going to say you can grab 5 things, but they've got to be British on the way out. What are you going to take?
Well, it wouldn't be a problem. I can tell you that. I'm wearing Clark's shoes today because I'm a big fan of Clark's. Oh, sorry, I love Clark's shoes. I like DM's, Clark's, Well, the first thing I would take would be a ring by Theo Fennell, which is like a skull, and it's studded with semi-precious stones, and it was a birthday present to me when I was 60. And that ring, every time I put it on, sometimes I wear it on television, but it's a bit bling for daytime telly. But that's a British designer who's been through all sorts of financial ups and downs and is still surviving. I would keep a set of placemats by Grayson Perry, the artist, because I love it when artists do multiples. And if you go to the Tate Gallery, or you can buy Grayson Perry scarves and jigsaw puzzles. I've got a Gilbert and George swear box that I got at the Tate Gallery from Fiverr. Yeah, I've been on best behaviour today. What else would I buy? I tried to think of... I've got in my bedroom a set of engravings by Dinos and Jake Chapman, who are they're called disasters of war, and there's about 75 of them. So I doubt I could grab the whole lot all in one go. And I was trying to think what else in the way, in terms of clothes, I don't know. I mean, I've got some fantastic cushions that are made of offcuts. I went to Carlisle a couple of years ago, and there's a factory in Carlisle that I want today to say this is one of the most amazing fabric places I have ever been to. It's called Linton Textiles. And the story of Linton is a kind of British story in microcosm. Coco Chanel met the owner of Linton Fabrics years and years and years and years ago. And they developed a way of weaving tweeds. They weave a lot of the tweeds for Chanel, for Karl Lagerfeld, for Ralph Lauren, and the factory also does a lot of really innovative textiles. And you can go to the factory shop and buy offcuts, and it's in Carlisle, on the outskirts of Carlisle, and it is just bliss.
Yeah.
And that factory, which started in 1930 or 40, is still going today and uses young designers to weave, not just with wool, with silk, with string. So they're working for designers all over the world. But they're like unsung heroes.
Well, maybe, hopefully for not much longer. Thank you, Janet. These are all the questions from me, but now I've got a chance to open up the floor to see if we've got any questions. I'm sure we have. We've got lots of people here. Just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you as soon as we can.